So, we have been covering the verses of fasting, and we looked at why, what has been prescribed, fasting, and why it's been prescribed, the taqwa. And then we've been talking about the dispensations that have been given for those, and that it's been given in the month of Ramadan, because this is a month in which the Quran was revealed, and this is why we are fasting, to celebrate the guidance that's given to us in our lives because of the Quran. And then we looked at that Allah does not wish this to be a difficulty on us. Just scroll back. Yes, whoever this is the month should fast. Whoever's present, i.e. not travelling, this month should fast. And Allah doesn't wish difficulty on you, but He wishes you ease, and for you to feel a sense of gratitude towards Him, and that the purpose of this state is to bring about a close proximity to God, leading this so that you can ask of Him and your prayers are answered. Being in a state of fasting is an opportunity for you to connect to Allah. And then we spoke last lesson about the first thing that's explicitly expressed that we can't do when we are fasting, which is sexual relations. And we spoke about how there are narrations that allude to the fact that the initial laws about fasting, when it was prescribed, was that if someone fell asleep after sunset, that they were not able to eat, drink, or have sexual relations if they fell asleep after sunset. And many Sahaba fell into that, and then that was actually abrogated, and Allah, and this is going to lead us into this verse, Allah understood or understands the need for one another, and that the sexual desire is something natural within us. And so, because of that, Allah would not place upon us a burden of having to refrain from sexual relations for a full month. And man and woman need one another. And so Allah understands that and has made it permissible to have relations in the night time rather than in the day. Now there's a bit of a difference of opinion about this issue. Some say that it was actually forbidden, and they were not allowed to have sexual relations or eat or drink if they fell asleep after dusk. However, there's another opinion that says it wasn't forbidden, but they assumed it was forbidden. And so Allah never made it, and actually never legislated that they were banned from relations or eating or drinking if they fell asleep after fasting, but it was something that was presumed because they knew this from either their previous traditions of fasting that was known to the Arabs, or because of the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, that they practiced this. And so we've got, as I said, we've got two opinions. Either it was a legislation that was later abrogated, or it was an assumption on the part of the believers. And that's important for us to understand that context when going through this next verse, or next part of the verse of 187. So Allah says, علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم. Okay. So علم الله, God knew. Notice He's used the past here. He could have said God knows, but the reason that Allah uses the past here, or the imperfect, or the perfect voice, the Madi, is because it's an event that's past. they practice this, and now they've come to the realization that they were struggling with this and unable to fulfill it, and Allah abrogated or clarified, said according to the two different views of opinion. So that's why alim is in the past. When it comes to Allah, we use the verb alima, to know, and alima means to be something clearly marked, demarcated, for someone to actually follow something. That's the nuances of this root, which is different to arafa. We've got another verb that means to know, arafa. Arafa ya'rifu. But we never use arafa for Allah. And the reason they say this, the scholars, is because arafa means to know something after not being ignorant of it. Whereas alima means that it's a knowledge that was always with the person. They knew this thing. So alima, 3 consecutive vowels, so we know it's in the past. Allah being the subject, so it takes a dhamma. Anna. So anna means that. And kum is the attached pronoun, because when we have pronouns after anna and inna and all the other sisters like la'alla and so forth, we need the attached pronoun. So Allah knew that you, okay, kuntum takhtanuna. Now there's a lot of emphasis here. We've got kum, we've got kuntum, we've got takhtanuna. What is the need for this attached pronoun kum when we've got the verb telling us what the person is? So we've got kuntum takhtanuna. That tells me it's in the second person plural. What's the point of the kum there? It's because after anna and inna, you cannot have a verb directly after it. And so we put an attached pronoun that agrees with the verb's subject after it. So God knows that, and that is reporting. So you'll see it after verbs such as I knew that, I heard that, I believe that, I think that, and so forth. So it's used with reporting verbs, we call it in English. Now kuntum, we use the verb kana yakunu, so the root is kaf, waw, noon, which is used for the past. Some of you might not be familiar with this verb. So kana Allahu, oh no, let's not do that. Kana rajul jamilan, for example. So if we don't have kana there, it just means the man is beautiful. If we put kana before it, it means the man was beautiful. Okay. So, but when we notice here, we've got kana plus the imperfect voice, the mudari', and that denotes a habit in the past, something regular that was continuous. And so, if they just use the past without kana, it implied just it was done once. But when you have kana with the imperfect after it, it implies that it was a continuous act in the past. And then we've got our verb, which is not in the first form here. Does anyone know what form that's in? As I said, if you haven't studied the 10 forms course, you won't be familiar with this, but you can still find the word in the dictionary. But you might be confused and see that maybe the root is kha, ta, noon, for example, or kha, ta, alif. But you need to know your forms to be able to recognize this. The root is a kha, alif, and noon, and then we know that alif is never a root letter, and so it's either going to be a waw or a noon. And the reality here is that we have to go to the dictionary to check, but the root is a waw. Okay, so in the first form it's khana, يخون. Okay, which is what we call a hollow verb. As I said, we'll study this in the weak forms class, for those who haven't done it yet. خان يخون is weak because it's got a wow in the middle. And that means to betray. But this is on a different form, which, as Junaid mentioned there, is a form 8. افتعل يفتعل. And this is Pakistan. Some Pakistani names are on this form, like ikhtiyar and imtiyaz, because the noun of this form, the verbal noun, is ifti'al. So ikhtiyar, imtiyaz, and so forth. And so, what does this word mean? Now, it's usually translated as to betray, and the root denotes it's an action, whether it's something carried out, whether it's word, whether it's an intention, whether it's a physical act that is in conflict with what one promised to do. So it's betrayal, or expected from one. There's another opinion that the root of this letter, the meaning of this root essentially is a deficiency, a weakness that's subtle, that one doesn't necessarily pick up on straight away. And so betrayals like that, initially you don't realize the person's betraying you, but then after a while you just get this sense of something's not right until it becomes completely obvious to you and shattering that you don't really want to believe either. So these are the nuances of this root. And so the questions come is, why did Allah use the 8th form over the first form? Now there's difference of opinion about this depending on the interpretation of this. Some say that this is just a more emphatic form. So using the 8th form over the first form is more emphatic. So this is a gross thing that you've done. Okay. This is a major thing that you've done. So you really went out your way, you really betrayed yourselves here. Others say that no, one of the nuances of the 8th form is to do something, because it's to do something that you thought was, one of the nuances of this root is to do something with intent. So the implication here is that you intended to do wrong, or you thought you were doing wrong, but you actually found out you weren't doing wrong. So that's a nuance there. And what's interesting here is that usually in the Quran, when it uses the first form, you're not betraying yourselves, you're betraying Allah. Because that's the reality here, is that if it was something that was in clear conflict with the Sharia, then you'd think that it was an actual, they were betraying Allah, the promise between them and Allah. But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say you betrayed Allah. It said you betrayed yourselves. Why? Because going with the opinion that it was never even legislated, this ruling in the first place, and it was permissible for them to eat, drink, and have sexual relations, even if they fell asleep after dusk. And they carried this out. They went against what they thought was. They went against what they thought was legally wrong. And so they felt bad about it, but the reality was they weren't. But there's still an element of blame there, because you thought you did something wrong. So, for example, we'll give a scenario. Say you saw something and you made an intent to steal it, and you did steal it, but then later on you found out that the thing was yours in the first place. So, is that a crime? No, it's not a crime, because you haven't stolen anything because it was yours. But the fact that you had that intent, the fact that you inclined towards it, even if it wasn't wrong, that's the thing that Allah takes you to task for. So that's the nuances of this. We're using the 8th form, and to mention that you betrayed yourselves, not Allah here. Okay. So let me just check here. It says he didn't use khiyana because they did not betray themselves. They inclined towards eating food. Yeah. Others say that, and we have clear hadith that they actually went against this legislation, or what they assume to be legislation. But it also falls into the category of people who inclined towards carrying these things out but didn't. So they felt these urges and they really wanted to, but they didn't. That's implied in takhtanuna. So takhtanuna can relate to the people that did carry out this what they assume to be in conflict with the Sharia, and it also can apply to those people who didn't, but they really wanted to. Okay, and they're really tempted to as well. It can apply to both. And so this is Allah understands in this verse that they had a weakness within them and they really struggled with it. And some of them even came forward and admitted it to the Prophet ﷺ that they had done it. And what Allah really wanted here from the Sahaba was them to admit their weaknesses and to really just come forward and struggle, and then something will come out of it. Something will come out of this situation where Allah will legislate ease for them. So this portion of the verse is inviting the believers to come forward. Why are you trying to struggle and hide? You know, those who actually fell into error, or what they thought was to be error, why did you keep it to yourselves? Why didn't you just come forward and call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you, instead of trying to hide and feel shameful about it and just stew over your guilt and your shame about that act? And those who just inclined, why don't you come forward and ask Allah to give you clarity and give guidance about how to deal with this matter? This is what this portion of the verse sort of invites us to. And when we are really struggling, sincere, there's no need to feel shame and there's no need to feel guilt. Rather, instead of stewing in your own guilt and shame about a situation that you're struggling with, come forward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get clarity from those in authority or those with knowledge in how to deal with this, instead of just stewing in your own guilt and shame and just not making the situation any better for yourselves and just pretending to display religion, but deep down behind closed doors you're not even able to implement it. As one of my teachers expressed it, as you're dressed up but you've got nowhere to go. You know, how many of us sometimes fall into that error? We're trying to present an image of ourselves before others and before Allah that we are strong, we are able to demonstrate that we are great in our religion and we don't fall into temptation. But we've got to admit sometimes our weaknesses and be real about our situation as well. This is what this calls to. And in fact, this portion of the verse is actually just explaining the verse before. It's giving clarity. Look, why are you trying to be Superman anyway? Why are you trying to pretend that you don't need your women? You do need your women, and you're weak and you're struggling with it. So come forward to get clarity. Come forward to gain. Come forward before those in knowledge, those in authority, to get clarity and maybe dispensation if need be. Or come forward to Allah and admit your weakness, and He will give you strength and give you clarity in how to deal with the situation. So this is what this is all clarifying here. Anfusakum. So anfusakum is the plural of nafs, and this is the plural of multiplicity. Remember, I've mentioned this. We've got two forms for nafs. We've got their plural. We've got af'ul and we've got nufus. Nufus is a plural of paucity, and anfus is the plural of multiplicity. Now I may have got that round the other way. Let me just think. Ni'am and shakir and ni'am. Sorry, it's the other way round. So this is paucity. So anfus means a few of you. So this demonstrates that there were a few from amongst you that were cheating themselves, not being true to themselves, betraying themselves. So it's isolating out those people that were struggling with it. There was a few amongst you. So don't feel just because everyone else is not struggling that it's not valid for you to come forward and you have to pretend. That's another nuance from here, very beautiful there. Is that often more than not we feel like we're the only ones struggling. But then we come forward and we find out there are other members that are struggling as well. And even if the vast majority are not struggling, it doesn't mean that discredits you in any way and dismisses your needs as well. This is the nuances here. Then Allah says, so anfusakum is the object, and hence why we've got no al, one vowel, because it's got an attached pronoun, because it's an idafa construction, a possessive construct. So your souls, yourselves here. That's the meaning here. Then Allah says, and the next sentence, فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. So fa here, and so because of this, there's two interpretations on this. Either because you were cheating yourselves, and He knew you were struggling, Allah has turned upon you, literally. Taba means to return. It means to turn your back and to return back to your destination. So Allah returns, and notice ala. So we say, Taba ilallah. He turned to Allah. He returned back to Allah. That's what repentance is. You regain your focus and direct yourself back to your source, to your destination, your goal. But if we say Taba, so to goes to the destination, but Taba ala means it has meanings of the mother coming to its child and protecting it. Ala is coming over it and protecting it, like it's shading it. And so that's a nuance here. Fataba, who? Allah. So Allah, He turned to you and He forgave you. That's the implications here. He had mercy over you despite your struggle. And so the mother sees the child struggling and it doesn't know how to reach out and ask for forgiveness or to ask for its need. And so Allah picks up, or this is just a metaphor, is that the mother senses that from the child, and so before it even, and senses its struggle, succumbs to it before it even asks. Very beautiful metaphor there for understanding how Allah is there for those who are struggling from amongst us, and those who are sinful from amongst us have fallen into error. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ, He has come over you. وَعَفَا عَنْكُمْ. Yeah. Sorry, some said that the fa here is actually fa al-fasiha. So fa could be, and because of that, I was explaining the reason here, or immediacy, straight away, as soon as you struggle, He came. So fa of immediacy, fa of reason, and so because of that, or fa al-fasiha. Fa al-fasiha is a fa that suggests and implies that some details have been missing from the context of the story, but they're obvious, and so they don't need to be mentioned. So, the famous example is in Surah Baqarah. It says that Adam received words from his Lord, so Allah accepted his repentance. But it doesn't mention that Adam actually came forward and repented, but that assumed and obvious that he would. And so this is the fa omits the detail, but it implies that what you assume in your mind is the case to be is the case, and is obvious. So what's implied here? It says, so because of that, you sought forgiveness and Allah forgave you. You didn't even hesitate to ask for forgiveness. But I'm a bit hesitant about that meaning here. I think the first one actually seems more fitting for the context. that it's not fa al-fasiha, the fa of eloquence, literally. That is so obvious you don't need to express it, and the listener picks up on that. So that's the three possible fas here. Then Allah says, وَعَفَا عَنْكُمْ, and He pardoned you. He gave you amnesty from so you intended to do something wrong that you thought was wrong, or you knew was wrong, depending on the interpretation of the verse. And so because when we do something wrong, there's a consequence to it. If you put your finger in the fire, you get burned. That's the assumption. But Allah has cut off He's omitted, He's removed the traces of the either consequence of the sin. And He's actually legislated, according to that other opinion, one of the opinions, He's removed that ruling and given an easier ruling that throughout from dusk to dawn, you're able to engage in food, drink and sex. So either removal of the consequence or removal of the ruling. That's what's implied here. So, and ankle means a distance between the two. So, the preposition an implies separation, applies distance between the two things. And so, between you and the thing. So, afa, He's pardoned you for that thing. And He's not mentioned what that thing is. Okay. He just says you betrayed yourself, so He doesn't even mention the act. Just like in the previous verse, he used the word rafath to apply to refer to sexual relations, but he didn't mention explicitly. He used a word that doesn't explicitly imply doesn't explicitly express sex. Like here, He doesn't even mention really in this verse what it was you actually committed. He doesn't say that you even committed it. Okay, in the verse before it said "Uhilla lakum." He just says "Uhilla lakum laylata siyami rafatu ila nisaikum." It's permissible for you to have relations with your wife. Okay, and He knew that you were cheating yourselves, but did you really cheat yourselves? And what was it you did? Okay, He's left that all ambiguous. So afa can imply both the ruling or the consequence. And afa is an interesting verb. It's got many verbs for forgiveness in the Quran. This is a weak verb. It's weak at the end. Ain, fa, wow. But it's manifested as an alif here. And afa, another nuance of afa is to ignore something. So to turn your eye away from something and not take action. And so Allah could have taken action, but He didn't. And another nuance is that it's covered over as well. He puts something over something that's subtle, so that no one else is aware of it around you as well. So these are all these beautiful nuances that we can draw from this verse. And so the lesson here is that God knows our states and He knows what we can handle. And if we can just turn to people of knowledge and counsel, that we can gain counselling from, and we can turn to Allah to express our need and throw it out to something greater, then He's going to show mercy to us, and He's going to offer us an opening. And the religion has not come to make things hard for us. Sometimes it's given us in order to struggle, because in that struggle there's good, and there's a greater good, and a greater ease that comes about after it, that we've mentioned. And so inherently there's not hardship in the religion. It's either it's for our good, and there are dispensations in times when we're really struggling. So thank you very much, guys. Inshallah, we won't have a class tomorrow because I'm away. But so Sunday will be the next class, inshallah. Thank you very much for tuning in and partaking in the lesson, and I look forward to reconnecting soon.